Queen of Denmark, becoming a widow by the sudden death of King Hamlet, in less than 2 months after his death, married his brother, Proteus, in outward appearance, as he was base and unworthy in disposition, and suspicions did not fail to arise in the mind of some, that he had privately made away with his brother, the late king, with the view of marrying his widow, and ascending the throne of Denmark, to the exclusion of young Hamlet, the son of the buried king, and lawful successor to the throne. But upon no one did this unadvised action of the queen make such impression as upon this young prince. He was overclouded with a deep melancholy, and lost all his mirth and all his good looks. All his customary pleasure in books forsook him. His princely exercise and sports, proper to his youth, were no longer acceptable. Not that the prospect of exclusion from the throne, his lawful inheritance, weighed so much upon his spirit, though that to a young and high-minded prince was a bitter wood and sore indignity. But what so got him, and took away all his cheerful spirits, was that his mother had shown herself so forgetful to his father's memories, and such a father, who had been to her so loving, so gentle a husband. A rumor had reached the ear of young Hamlet that an apparition exactly resembling the dead king his father had been seen by the soldiers upon watch on the platform before the palace at midnight for 2 or 3 nights successively. The figure come constantly clad in a same suit of armor from head to foot, which the dead king was known to have worn. And they who saw it, Hamlet's bosom friend Horatio was one, agreed in their testimony as to the time and manner of its appearance, that it came just as the clock struck 12, that it looked pale, with a face more of sorrow than of anger. The young prince, strangely amazed at their relation, which was too consistent and agreeing with itself to disbelieve, concluded that it was his father's ghost which they had seen, and determined to take his watch with the soldiers that night, that he might have a chance to seeing it. For he reasoned with himself that such an appearance did not come for nothing, but that the ghost had something to impart, and though it had been silent hitherto, yet he would speak to him. He called him by his name, Hamlet, king, father, and conjured him that he would tell the reason why he had left his grave. The spirit told him that he was the ghost of Hamlet, his father, who had been cruelly murdered, and he told the manner of it, that it was done by his own brother, Claudius Hamlet's uncle, as Hamlet had already but too much suspected, for the hope of succeeding to his bed and crown. The terror which the sight of the ghost had left upon the sense of Hamlet, he being weak and dispirited before, almost unhinged his mind, and drove him beside his reason. And he, fearing that it would continue to have this effect, which might subject him to observation, and set his uncle upon his guard, if he suspected that he was meditating anything against him, or that Hamlet really knew more of his father's death than he professed, took up a strange resolution, from that time, to cultivate as if he were really and truly mad, thinking that he would be less an object of suspicion when his uncle should believe him incapable of any serious project, and that his real perturbation of mind would be best covered and past concealed under a disguise of pretended lunacy. However, he could not help having some scruples upon his mind, whether the spirit which he had seen was indeed his father, or whether it might not be the devil, who he had heard has power to take any from his place, and who might have assumed his father's shape only to take advantage of his weakness and his melancholy, to drive him to the doing of so desperate an act as murder, and he determined that he would have more certain grounds to go upon than a vision, or apparition, which might be a delusion. While he was in this irresolute mind, there came to the court certain players, in whom Hamlet formerly used to take delight, and particularly to hear one of them speak a tragical speech, describing the death of old Priam, king of Troy, with the grief of Hecuba, his queen. Hamlet welcomed the players, and remembering how that speech had formerly given him pleasure, requested the player to repeat it, which he did in so lively a manner, setting forth the cruel murder of the feeble old king. To be or not to be, that is the question. To die, to sleep, no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heart ache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. It is a consummation devoutly to be wished. Hamlet observed the king, his uncle, change color as this expression struck upon the conscience of this usurper, that he was unable to sit out the rest of the play, but on a sudden calling for lights to his chamber, and affecting or partly feeling a sudden sickness, he abruptly left the theatre. But before he could make up his resolutions as to what measures of revenge he should take, now he was certainly informed that his uncle was his father's murderer. He was sent for by the queen, his mother, to a private conference in her closet. It was by desire of the king that the queen sent for Hamlet, that she might signify to her son how much his late behavior had displeased them both. And the king, wishing to know all that passed at that conference, and thinking that the too partial report of a mother might let slip some part of Hamlet's words, which it might such import to the king to know, Polonius, the old councillor of state, was ordered to place himself behind the hanging in the queen's closet, where he might unseen hear all that passed. Then Hamlet noticed him, and verily thinking that it was the king himself there concealed, he drew his sword and stabbed at a place where the voice came from, and he would have stabbed a rat that ran there, till the voice ceasing, he concluded the person to be dead. But when he dragged forth the body, it was not the king, but Polonius, the old officious councillor, that had planted himself as a spy behind the hangings. And now Hamlet was at leisure to consider who it was that in his confusion rashness he had killed, and when he came to see that it was Polonius, the father of the lady Ophelia, whom he so dearly loved, he drew apart the dead body, and his spirit being now a little quieter, he wept for what he had done. The unfortunate death of Polonius gave the king a pretence of sending Hamlet out of the kingdom. He would willingly have put him to death, fearing him as dangerous, but he dreaded the people, who loved Hamlet, and the queen, who, with all her force, doted upon the prince, her son. So this subtle king, under pretence of providing for Hamlet's safety, that he might not be called to account for Polonius' death, caused him to be conveyed on board a ship bound for England, under the care of two courtiers, by whom he dispatched letters to the English court, which in that time was in subjection, and paid tribute to Denmark, requiring for special reasons there pretended that Hamlet should be put to death as soon as he landed on English ground. They attacked by pirates, and a sea fight commenced, in the course of which Hamlet, desirous to show his valor, with sword in hand, singly boarded the enemy's vessel, while his own ship, in a cowardly manner, bore away, and leaving him to his fate. The two courtiers made the best of their way to England, charged with those letters the sense of which Hamlet had altered to their own deserved destruction. The pirates, who had the prince in their power, showed themselves gentle enemies, and knowing who they had got prisoner, in the hope that the prince might do them a good turn at court in recompense for any favor they might show him, they set Hamlet on shore at the nearest port in Denmark. From that place, Hamlet wrote to the king, acquainting him with the strange chance which had brought him back to his own country, and saying that on the next day he should present himself before his majesty. When he got home, a sad spectacle offered itself, the first thing to his eyes. This was the funeral of the young and beautiful Ophelia, his once dear mistress. Then discovering himself, he leaped into the grave where Laertes was, all as frantic, more frantic than he, and Laertes, knowing him to be Hamlet, who had been the cause of his father's and his sister's death, grappled him by the door as an enemy, till the attendants parted them, and Hamlet, after the funeral, excused his hasty act in throwing himself into the grave as if to break Laertes. But he said he could not bear that anyone should seem to outgo him in grief for the death of the fair Ophelia. And for the time, these two noble youths seemed reconciled, but out of the grief and the anger of Laertes for the death of his father and Ophelia, the king, Hamlet's weak uncle, contrived destruction for Hamlet. He set on Laertes, under cover of peace and reconciliation, to challenge Hamlet to a friendly trial of skill at fencing, which Hamlet accepting, a day was appointed to try the match. At this match all the court was present, and Laertes, by direction of the king, prepared a poisoned weapon. At first, Latius would play with Hamlet and suffered him to gain some advantages, which the dissembling king magnified and extolled beyond measure. Drinking to Hamlet's success and wondering which bet upon the issue. But after a few pulls, Latius' growing warmth made a deadly thrust at Hamlet with his poison weapon and gave him a mortal blow. Hamlet incensed, but not knowing the whole of the treachery, in a scornful exchanged his own innocent weapon for Latius' deadly one, and with the thrust of Latius' own sword repaid Latius home, who was thus justly caught in his own treachery. In this instant the queen shrieked out that she was poisoned. She had inadvertently drunk out of a bowl which the king had prepared for Hamlet, in case that, being won in fencing, he should call for drink. Into this the treacherous king had infused a deadly poison. To make sure of Hamlet, if Latius had failed, he had forgotten to warn the queen of the bowl, which she drank off, and immediately died, exclaiming with her last breath that she was poisoned. When Hamlet saw his end draw near, there being yet some venom left upon the sword, he suddenly turned upon his false uncle, and thrust the point of it to his heart, fulfilling the promise which he had made to his father's spirit, whose injunction was now accomplished, and his full murder revenged upon the murderer. Then Hamlet, feeling his breath failed and life departing, turned to his dear friend Horatio, who had been spectator of his fatal tragedy, and with his dying breath requested him that he would live to tell his story to the world, for Horatio had made a motion as if he would state himself to accompany the prince in death, and Horatio promised that he would make a true report, as one that was privy to all the circumstances.